I would like you to just clarify a bit more about the title of the book and the structure of the book, and just explain what it does a little bit.
That's a good idea.
It is.
I was just going to point out, it's kind of theatrical, that Elinor Ostrom built her own house. And I can't do that, but at least I make my own beer, and I'm gonna drink it. Basically, the idea I originally had with books is I thought I would do something which is more academic and something which is more popular. So the academic book is the Sustainable Economics of Elinor Ostrom, which is 100,000 word PhD size tome, which I obsessed about. I really was very, very intense with that. That's the only intense intellectual engagement I'm likely to have in my life. So that's the academic book. But being an academic book, it's obscenely expensive. It's like, it's like 30, 40 quid for the eBook. So that was the kind of like academic thing. So I think it's important to kind of do these academic things, get them in the library, then they exist, analyse the stuff. And then what I felt was I wanted to do something which was more popular. And it took me a long time to get round to it, but I think it's kind of where I'm coming from is really the kind of Jeremy Corbyn moment. So the Green Left book, which is one of the ones here, I'm really pushing the books. Yeah. As you know, Pluto hates it when I do book launches, because I always tell people to get it from the library, and they really hate me, but I don't think anybody from Pluto's here, and even if you don't buy my books, buy nice books from the Bookshop here, because it needs supporting. So the Green Left book was actually launched by, this is terrible name dropping, by Corbyn, because John McDonnell couldn't come. So where we are at the moment is like the left have advanced a lot in Britain, kind of neoliberal ideas are under challenge. So what I was kind of thinking is, Elinor Ostrom's kind of very pragmatic, practical radicalism, I think has got a lot of potential for thinking about how we do politics. So for example, one of the things she has is institutional mapping. So if you're like fighting fracking or a court case or you have a campaign, what you do is you map the institution, see who has power, look at the possible moves that people can make. I mean, she's Mrs. Machiavelli, really. So that's kind of where it came from. So what I've done in the book is kind of introduce the stuff and tried to kind of make it accessible. And the idea is that it's very much aimed at people who are politically active, that it might give them something useful. So Remain here, very much, was like the perfect reader. Remain does amazing political things, so it's kind of aimed at people like Remain. Yeah?
Ammunition, I call it.
Ammunition. So it's kind of to repeat the idea that politics isn't just having a set of abstract principles, but it's how you actually intervene and take practical action. Does that? Yeah. Keep asking me things. Mm-hmm. Or is that silenced you? Yeah.
It's not been clear to me to what extent Elinor Ostrom saw the types of institutions she was talking about as more horizontal than other institutions. Some people are certainly using her ideas in that way, so it's sort of more appropriate to sort of more horizontalist organising. But did she see it in that way?
Yes and no. So where it comes up is a lot of the kind of ideological stuff in terms of like she's obviously pro horizontal integration, institutions, deep democracy, like ecology, collective ownership, diversity. There's some like normative stuff in there. But what she was really interested was like the kind of practicalities of it. But the politics that she and Vince got, because Vince, her husband, is very important to this as well, and a whole network, is this what I would call radical Republican politics. Not in the sense of Donald Trump, but Republican in the sense of res publica, Latin for the public thing. And what you have is a whole politics which is about participation. So what she was passionate about, and Vincent just as well, is that liberal democracy only takes us so far, that what you need is deep democracy where people participate. So she was certainly very, very keen on that, and you can defend it in terms of horizontality, but I feel that a lot of people who read her stuff are not necessarily aware of the political background. So where they're kind of coming from is like city-states in Italy. So it's like you've got the whole of the citizens taking part, that kind of thing. So, I joke about Machiavelli, but Machiavelli, of course, was an official in Florence. So I always say to people, Shakespeare wrote 30 plays for princes, and Machiavelli only wrote one book for princes. So it's that, she's not Machiavellian in quite the same sense, but it's that idea of radical democracy. What she did say is, though kind of face-to-face contact in the commons makes it easier to cooperate, you can't just have grassroots institutions, because if you look at ecological problems, they work at a regional level, national level, international level. So her events talked about things being polycentric. So there's a lot of politics, often hidden, which is deeply pro-deep democracy, but she felt that you needed some vertical levels as well.
I actually wanted to ask about that because I haven't read her work on fisheries, but I know she was very critical of the EC and Europe, and I'm just interested in whether she believed that the kind of international intervention was, or that level was ever possible or good, or exactly where the lines are drawn in terms of her take on Europe and the commons.
Yeah, there's actually online at least one paper, possibly more, where people have taken her approach to look at the European Union. So she did a lecture for the Institute of Economic Affairs, so fairly to the right, and that was fun because all the audience went to the free bar, and then I had lots of time to talk to her about Karl Marx, which is very and at that she was critical of the common fisheries policy. And she felt if you've got a one-size-fits-all policy for the whole of the fisheries, that's going to go wrong. But, she was cautious about ideological uses of her writing. I don't know how scared she'd be of my uses. And a lot of the ideological uses on the right sort of hint that she's an extreme libertarian, and she wasn't an extreme libertarian. She's got a skepticism of the state, partly for her origins, and she made the point with the state that the state is seen as a kind of black box, that there's market failure, for those of us teaching economics, there's general problems in society, so who do we call? The government. And the government quite often fuck up, don't get it right, there's problems, and she was certainly where she'd agree with Hayek is there's a knowledge problem, that particularly for ecology, people at the grassroots often have more knowledge than people centrally. But she was certainly very clear, some environmental problems, you need an international dimension. So, for example, on climate change, she was very, very keen on global agreements, but she again would have this polycentric approach of saying you can do stuff individual level, city level. Yeah? So, my kind of take on the European stuff, she's not looked at the EU in detail. I think it's far too simplistic to say she would be against it, because she would recognise that some problems need to be tackled at a European level, and the thing is, how do you then get a kind of complex organisation with, grassroots input and so on? But she, where she's libertarian to an extent, which I think is very good, is to say we quite often treat the state as just being, we'll give it to the state. I mean, where she's coming from is not always usual positions. Keep asking.
So is that? I mean, don't know. Haven't read her stuff. I'm going to get into it through your book, but I've been reading more and more about libertarianism, ideological libertarianism, or libertarianism in politics, and realising that in the US, libertarianism is largely a kind of ideology of the right. Libertarianism in Europe is largely an ideology of the left. So libertarian socialism and anarchism, we do not have anarcho-capitalists in Europe, as far as I know, but they're all over the place in the US. So, and that whole tradition. And I wondered if you could offer any insights into where that comes from. Is it to do with the continental-sized, the continental scale of the United States, or the fact that they never had outright fascism in the 20th century, or something, which doesn't explain it either, because or something around that. I don't know if you've got any thoughts.
I certainly should be very Ostrom-like and just say nothing. She was very good at when people ask questions about stuff she didn't know about, not commenting. I'm not that disciplined, but I'm not, somebody who really kind of has studied or looked at the history of libertarianism. I think it might be a superficial judgment, but certainly I'd agree we get it more in the States, and there does seem to be quite a much more kind of individualistic ethos. And I guess the kind of cliche is that it's something where you've got a kind of colonisers, people set up their farmsteads. Initially, central government was very weak. The positive bit of it that fits in with republicanism is if you look at the American Constitution, that's inspired by Tom Paine and city-states and so on. So, there's maybe some positive stuff going in there. And I'd certainly say about the States that, if you look at James Buchanan, who's a right-wing economist, but very free market economist, but very important to Elinor Ostrom. A lot of stuff on constitution building. He was also fun because he disagreed. He wanted 100% inheritance tax. So he felt that if you believe in the market is about working hard. So you have to have like 100% inheritance tax. I'm digressing because I know, like a libertarian free market argument for every form of communism or leftism for when I'm an election candidate. So where was I? Talking about libertarians and went off to Buchanan.
But you're free to do so.
But I'm free to do so, but I should be disciplined and not verbal. Buchanan, his stuff on public choice, there was always a worry that it would turn into Marxism, because his public choice, it would be like politicians are self-interested, exploit voters and so on, and then that's a much more individualistic version of saying there's a ruling class. So again, whether you're on the left or the right, there's reasons maybe to not see the state as solving all our problems. So neither myself nor Ostrom were, absolute anti-statists, but the state isn't some lovely institution necessarily. It soon gets into quite intense stuff with Ostrom, doesn't it?
Do you think some of her rules might apply in Rojava?
I do to a tremendous amount. So Rojava I mentioned at the start. This is where the Kurds and their allies have set up a self-governing republic in the north of Syria, and the kind of politics of this is, if there are various different strands with the Kurds, but a significant part of Kurdish ideology comes from Öcalan, who's the historic leader of the Kurds, who was kidnapped, I think, in Kenya and has been in solitary confinement, I think, for decades. And he, is like an iconic figure for the Kurds, and he's also a very significant political theorist. And what he did was move from basically being a Marxist-Leninist, so it's kind of the idea that the PKK, the Kurdish liberation, was modelled on what was happening with the Viet Cong, and ideas that you'd have like national liberation struggles as a stage towards communism. And he and the Kurds that support that kind of ideology have shifted the ideology, so it's like libertarian, anarchist, and unusually the kind of key intellectual figure is Murray Bookchin. Some people know about Bookchin. So Murray Bookchin was a New York anarchist. So if you're in the politics department, you know about New York anarchists and how they roll. And, Öcalan read Bookchin's books after Bookchin died, got hugely inspired by them. Before he died. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, before. I must be accurate on this.
Thank you very much.
My personal relations with Bookchin, that's another matter. That's controversy. I may get denounced in a minute. So basically,
we heard he was a bit of an arsehole.
I'm sure people say the same about me. So the Bookchin ideology is democratic confederalism, grassroots democracy based on city-states. Where I think the Ostrom stuff is useful for the Kurds is it's looking in great detail about how you build institutions, how you promote participation. So it's this basic theme that I have of the division between ideology and science, and you can never keep them entirely separate. But the ideology is about like a collective identity. You've got sets of things that you believe in, The science, in the most democratic and non-elitist way, is how you investigate and achieve those things. So she was much more about how you actually make the commons work and how the democracy works. So I think the kind of nuts and bolts research she was doing is good for that kind of project. I'd say literally where you've had a revolution and you've got these kind of new institutions, she'd be exactly what you want. And the left, of course, traditionally have been very poor on this, because they would say you have the revolution and then you build a new society, but they've not, it's very much been a kind of blank space. Yeah, so definitely.
Probably want to start wrapping up now.
Yeah, I would say on that, something that was very sad is we lost Mehmet Aksoy. I don't know whether people know. I know some people here know about Mehmet Aksoy. So he went to Goldsmiths, was a student, was a filmmaker, was a member of the Kurdish community, and he did lots of filmmaking and media for the Kurdish community here. And he commissioned me to write an article about Elinor Ostrom and Rojava. So that goes into it in detail. Sadly, he was killed in Syria on September the 26th. And I think when we're here, it's good to kind of remember him. So there's the detailed stuff there. Shall I have one or two more questions?
I haven't. I've started reading it, but I've only got a few chapters in. But I noticed one of the later chapters is on intersectionality and feminism, and I was wondering what kind of connection there is there.
Okay, well, she saw herself as a feminist economist, and what I would say with that is the key thing maybe is listening. So if we look at economics is incredibly gendered, isn't it? That the fact that she so far has been the only woman to win the prize, and typically it will be, particularly with older generations, women not getting access to maths, then being excluded from the economics. And economics quite often comes up with formal models. I'm not against formal models, she wasn't against formal models, but it's not very good at going into the field, seeing where the formal models don't work, how they can be changed, listening to people. So there's that kind of element of feminist economics, of listening, and of challenging some of the kind of often seen as fundamentals of economics. And I'd also throw in Deirdre McCluskey, who's like very important feminist economist and somebody a bit more on the right than Ostrom, but also very good at criticising some of the simplicities of economics. I think the fundamental thing is, though she didn't theorise about diversity and intersectionality, one of her normative political principles was diversity. And again, like where the George Mason people have been really good on this, is to say most social thinkers like things to be more homogenous. They believe that, whether on the left or the right, that if people are more similar in society, you get more social cohesion. They view diversity as a kind of problem, or they have some kind of, apparently Habermas does this, you have some kind of dialectical thing where on some higher level diversity turns into uniformity. And her basic view is if you have a diverse society, it's more resilient, it's more democratic. If you've got people with very diverse cultures and ideas, then it becomes much better at making decisions. So she had some definite interventions in terms of diversity and anti-racism. That's a nice story about when she worked in a lawyer's in a law office in Boston to get her husband through law school, and then he didn't want to do the PhD, so she divorced him. That was quite fun because she said even divorce is like problem solving, and it's, you get the Ostrom thing. So she was saying how proud she was that when she started, all the people were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and then she got it so it was a lot more diverse. And she had some Jewish heritage. I think her dad was Jewish and her mum wasn't, and she used to get shouted at because she was Jewish. And she said, "I've always had always wanted to stand up for people who are a bit different." So she didn't get into lots of theorising about intersectionality, but diversity was really important to her. Shall I take one more? Or if maybe there's no more.
There might be two.
Tom.
I was going to say, you said that she's an educator. What would she say about formal school?
I think she'd be sceptical about a lot of the way it works. It's too like paternalistic, telling people what to do. She wanted much more participation. Though she kind of didn't like have a class analysis, it's very much, she certainly had that implicit thing that it's like educators are like an elite group, and then we kind of talk down to other people. So she's got that, and with university education, it's very much radically democratise it. Like one story I like from her is when she won the Nobel Prize, she did a draft of a Nobel speech and took it along to the workshop, which is what they called their little institution, and basically got her students, she said, to kind of rip it apart and criticise it before she rewrote it. So she was kind of positively Maoist when it comes to education. And again, with the democracy, she was really keen that we got taught about participation, and that democracy in politics, it's not just about senates and congresses and so on. So she felt unless people were educated about participating in democracy and being citizens, you wouldn't get any democracy. And there's lots of her stuff on the new radical political economy.
I was just, it's not a very long question. I was just wondering how her work was received at the time when she first became more widely recognised compared to how it is now, or if there's a difference.
I think generally people are completely baffled. I think what you have, there's very different receptions of her stuff. So the workshop, which was their kind of thing, where they do the workshopping, I remember a story of somebody saying we're being warned off of it and said, don't go there, you'll end up measuring trees in Guatemala. That's really strange stuff. So they did lots of actual practical ecology and all sorts of things. And from the workshop, you got really, somebody described it as like the cult, that you had like a passionate following of the Ostroms. And then the people who picked up on this were maybe more the kind of George Mason University free market people, but whose scholarship is generally excellent. There's a wider field of institutional economics where she's obviously big, but when she won the prize, there was a certain amount of like abuse on blogs, although it is blogs, of course, they're maybe not representative, and a lot of people who were studying economics hadn't heard of her and were shocked by this and didn't think it was real economics. And then what you get with her ideas is a lot of people think, oh, she believed in the commons, she was a leftist, so on and so forth. And one thing she said was, okay, she did the work on the commons, but she said there are no panaceas. She didn't believe that commons and collective ownership were the solution to everything. I would say what she believed in was a really mixed economy. She'd have some free market, some state, some Wikipedia, some collective ownership, that kind of thing. So there's been more interest in her stuff, but sometimes it's rather as a slogan. And then what's amused me a lot is the people where I also came across commons were the autonomist Marxists, things like Midnight Notes, Negre and Hart, very out there Marxists, very libertarian, and I think the Negre and Hart stuff really actually in some ways links in with her. And Michael Hart said, no, I'm not going to write a thing for the back of the book because I'm too busy, but it would be really great, she was important. So I think to some extent they get her, but a lot of the autonomist Marxists and people on the radical left really have no idea what she's up to. They tend to go, oh, she's like quite managerial, she participates in official programmes. They haven't got enough insight to start criticising her because she might know Hayek. Yeah? So the reception has been strange, but I think the project is really to kind of spread the word, get people talking about it. It's important. Right. Great to see so many of you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.